Good afternoon, everyone. Mary Sloan here with the Inspirational Influencers News. Secrets of people making money and making a difference. And my guest this afternoon, Anita Carter, is certainly one of those people who is doing precisely that. Anita has been a parent problem solver for over 24 years with experience as a therapist, a behavior coach, her own parenting experience as a teen mom and as a grandmother, and now a great grandmother. I was saying to her, no, that's not possible. You don't look that. But hey, I think we're getting people that have children younger. And anyway, the great grandmother thing is a great experience, she tells me. So that's fantastic. Anita helps parents elevate their parenting skills and their lives so that they can maximize their relationships with their children and decrease the feelings of failing as a parent. She can help you decrease your feelings of being disrespected and increase the feelings of joy and fulfillment in your interaction with your children. So, Anita, tell me, what is the one thing that you really want to be sure people understand that you really see in your practice and can bring to the world to help other parents, grandparents, great grandparents? We're all involved in this.
Well, thank you, Mary, first of all, for having me on. I'm so honored. So I began my journey with all of this and putting all of this together from my own personal experience. I was a teenage mom, and I was illiterate and until my late 20s. And so being a parent and a teenage mom, and then I became a wife. And it was okay when my kids were younger, but when they hit that school age, it was a struggle for me because I was illiterate. And I did a lot of my parents' parenting program and their parenting styles. And so it's learned. And I realized that I was doing everything that I said I was going to try to change in my own parenting style for my kids. And the only way I could do that was I became self-aware of me yelling and screaming at my kids and not being there and connecting with them during those times when they were struggling with homework because of my illiteracy. And I just went down to the neighborhood college and I got tested and I found out where I was at my level. And the most important thing was that I found out that I let go of that shame and that embarrassment because I needed to be the better role model and the mom my kids needed. And so I went through a lot. And I never
That is a lot. Wow.
And I never stopped learning. And so I showed my kids that. And I remember going home that day after I got tested and I told my kids the reason why I would avoid homework with them. And I'd send them to I was very lucky to have their aunt do their homework with her children. And because of that shame and that guilt and that embarrassment, I never asked her to just help me. And that would have been the better thing to do. But shame and embarrassment and guilt can eat you away if you don't become aware of it and you don't let it go. And you let what you really have a passion for is being a mom and being there for your kids. Let it go. And do the things that you need to do to achieve in your life. So your kids know that it's never too late to learn. My kids learned that. And when I went home and told my sons, I was crying of embarrassment and crying because I wasn't there for them. And my oldest son was, I want to say he was almost 8, 9. And
it can be very amazingly prescient at that point, you know?
And he says, Mom, don't worry about it. We could all do our homework together now. And my youngest one just started laughing and they just hugged me. And that meant so much to me that I tried harder and harder and worked harder. And I went into the field of being a therapist because of all the emotions that it took a toll on me growing up. My parents didn't know how to help me during those times. They didn't have IEPs or all of that. And my parents didn't know how to help me. It wasn't because they didn't want to, they didn't know. And that made my eyes open to learning the system and learning what you need to learn to help your children if they need it. And I had a severe ADHD child as well. And I didn't want to put him on medication either, because at the time, Ritalin was the only thing. So I know how it is firsthand to struggle with your kids, to get them to eat right, to do their homework, to even the social media. I have grandchildren now that I'm struggling with that. And I've approached it with them in a different manner than their parents do, my son and my daughter-in-law, because of what I have learned, and being demanding and not allowing us to have that. Because I grew up in the era of you are to be seen and not heard. But generations have changed now. These children want to be heard. They just don't know how to communicate with us to meet their needs. And us as parents, we have to learn how to communicate with them so that we could be the role model so that they can communicate with us. They're not good communicators. It's also because of their developmental. They can't comprehend like we can, and it took us a while to learn that. And some parents, and myself included, we're still learning, right? As human beings, we learn all the time. Well, one thing that I have learned is very crucial is that instead of being demanding when you're trying to make that communication with your child or conversation, ask questions. Approach them with asking questions and not interrupting. We tend to interrupt our kids because we want to get it, we have a fast-paced life, and we have time that's limited. Get it? I get it. I was that way. I can be that way sometimes with my grandchildren, and I have to take a step back and say, oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Did you want to tell grandma something? I didn't remember, And I know that this worked with the families that I've helped, because that was some of the things that I saw them doing in their home. And I would just watch and observe for the first couple of weeks when I would go in and help them. And then I would start giving them the tools and letting them see it in a different way. The closed-minded needs to be open-minded. It's not like it was when we grew up, parents, or you young parents. It's time for us to look at how we can be open-minded, allow each other, not just the kids, but each other to have our own opinions, our own voice, compromise, flexibility with each other. And I find that when I argue with my 13-year-old grandson, sometimes I have to take a step back and say, okay, grandma needs a timeout. And it's okay for me to tell you that I need a timeout, because we give you timeout. I'm going to tell you grandma needs a timeout. I take a step back and I go, okay, give me this time. And then let's set an hour and we'll go back in the kitchen and we'll talk about it. And then we set our watches for a time, because watches today have timers. And then we come back and we talk about it. And he'll tell me what I said and how I said it and how it made him do that fight
or flight thing. Yeah.
Yes. And so, we tend to not think before we talk. All of us, we're human. But that's something we all have to work on. And we have to make sure that we do that with our children, especially.
Well, you learn sometimes that the best communication and the best way to communicate is by asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
So that rather than coming from your judgment and your position, find out what they think. Give them a chance first. They may have a really good idea. If
Yeah.
you could just step back and not start from your judgment, and I did some work around landmark education years back. And, the most powerful thing that I learned was to listen for people. And I say to people about my style here when you and I are having a conversation is I try to listen for my guest, so that I allow them to present their story in the most flattering light, and that they get have a really good interview, because that's how we give the audience the best opportunity to see different people. Nobody wants to hear a know-it-all, blithering on all the time. When they bring in guests with real knowledge and real experience and better knowledge, nobody wants to hear me talk, and yeah, I mean, it's real tempting. I've got kids, I've got grandkids, and so the thing is, oh, I want, but it's sort of like everybody has, and that's how we approach our kids and our grandkids. Is like, but I want to try,
Yeah,
instead of,
absolutely.
hey, what happened at school? Well, how's it going? What do you think? No, do you have a friend? What's your friend's name? Things like that. Get them talking.
Yes. Always use open-ended questions with your children when you want to get that communication, that connection with them. I don't use like, how was your day at school? I'll say, who'd you eat lunch with today? What was your lunch conversation about, with your friend? Did you meet any new friends? Did you introduce yourself to anybody new? And I find that, listening with intent is very important too. When we're talking with our children, we need to listen with intent. We need to really let them know we're listening. Put down your cell phone or stop what you're doing just to listen, because then they know that they're important and you're really listening to what they have to say, because what they have to say means something. And what you have to say to them, they'll do the same, because you're role modeling that to them. So they're going to not be on their tablet or their whatever when you're wanting to talk to them. They may put it down because they see you do it when they talk with you. Be the role model. And then I found that being aware of your communication style, is it effective or ineffective? And people don't look at it that way. Like, is the yelling effective or is it ineffective? Demanding and telling them instead of going and asking them or giving them a time frame. I find that that's important too. That was one of the things that I did with one of my family members one of my families that I worked with their family, family member who was raising her grandchildren, but raising them in her mom and dad's house. And that was one of the things that was going on with them, was her way of always going at her, I guess it would be considered her grandchildren. It would be considered their children, because it was her raising her children because they were taken away. And that was one of the things that she kept doing, was she kept, go, I told you to go throw that garbage out 5 minutes ago. Or get your homework on that table in 10 minutes or you're going to get smacked or whatever. And I was just like, wow, is that an effective way of communicating with them? Because then they would take their time and they wouldn't really do it, or they wouldn't do it at all. And so we started looking at her way of, is it effective or ineffective? And when I started having her look at that, and even the grandparents, it changed. It changed, because then they started saying, when the child was doing homework and they needed them to go do the dishes or whatever, how much more time do you need on your homework before I can see if the dishes are going to get done? than stop doing your homework and get over there and do those dishes like I told you. So it is, it is what we do though. Because we want things done when we want things done. And we have to start to look at the main things are our communication styles. How are we doing, effective or ineffective, listening with intent, and asking questions and being okay without interrupting and getting other family members' opinions and their ideas, because like you said, they might have a good one. They might have a good one. Like my grandson, one time I was saying, well, can't we go do this? Let's go play soccer first at this park, and then we'll go to the park where all the swings and everything are for the younger ones, but let's get this done first. And he's like, Grandma, if we go to the one park that's down the street further down, they have everything right there. Can we do that? And then I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I forgot about that park. We could go to that park, and then I don't have to drive to one thing and drive to another. We could just drive to the one park. But had I not been open, I wouldn't have remembered that.
Yeah. And it's so, I don't know, tempting. I'm not even sure the right word. We don't remember that they have thoughts from a very early age. They have thoughts, and letting them express those thoughts and talking about them, and what they see and how they are perceiving the world can be very helpful in us understanding where they're really struggling, and where maybe it's time to intervene a little bit, or maybe there's an opportunity for some education, or suggesting something else, or encouraging them to try a different way. Like you say, ask, how's it working? Is that really effective?
Yeah.
Are you getting the result that you want? Is that, and how do you think we could make this better so that you get the result? Do you think this might work? Or do you think, instead of compelling them, do it this way, let them have some struggles, and let them have a chance to, oh, I see. Okay. No, this worked better.
Yeah. Like, I know that there are sometimes that us as parents or grandparents, or as individuals, aunts and uncles, or whatever the role that you are in that child's life, we tend to, our biggest thing is that we want to keep our kids safe, and we want to protect them. And we forget that if we give everything to them and we keep them isolated, or we keep them from learning and living that experience, then it's going to be harder for them when they go out into the real world too. So it's okay for us to be there when something does happen for our child, like a friend gets mad at them and they start to see other friends are stop talking to them too. Okay, well, let's sit down and let's talk about it. Let's see, what is it that you feel you can do to get your friend and you to talk again? Then let them problem solve for a while, try to problem solve. And when they can't, then we can intervene, and we can come in and we can talk with the parent of the parent, the child or whatever. But let's try to see if we can give them that opportunity to have that process and figure it out, feel it out, and see what works and what doesn't work for them, because then they're going to come back and say, well, it didn't work, Mom. Now what do I do? Okay, well, let's take a step back. Because one thing,
what else do you think you could do?
What else do you think?
And making them little problem solvers, because that's what it takes to navigate the world successfully. We're all, nobody gave us a roadmap when we came into the world and said, follow this roadmap and you'll be perfect. You'll be rich and happy for the rest of your life.
Follow the yellow brick road. Yeah, no, that's not
We didn't
reality.
get that map. Somebody forgot. And so we're kind of in the discovery mode from the time we were born. And, it's sort of, you watch little babies, and that's,
Well, if you think about it, we're still in the discovery world as parents because things are changing constantly and we have to be a step ahead, or we have to be with our child in that process together.
yeah.
Because there are some things that, as a parent, I have two adult children, but still, I'm still their parent. I'm still their mom. And there are things that they struggle with. And I'm still trying to be that helicopter mom, and I can't. I have to look at what is it that I can do to help them through it or help them with it.
Yeah. Can I be there as a sounding board? Can I be there to encourage them to try another approach, to think about it again? Try it from a different position. What do they think? The other side to their problem is thinking, or because generally, sometimes we have issues with stuff, but generally, other than tech, okay, I hate tech. But apart from that,
I'm with you there.
apart from that, generally, it was with people. Like, how do I get her? What's going to make this person work? What's going to get me to get the result I'd like with this person, and so apart from, as I said, with my tech, apart from that, it's people. And, we're all trying to figure out the best way to deal with the people in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it starts at a very early age and continues for about as long as we live.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely true. And I found that what helps that I've been able to pass on to a lot of the families I work with, it was to have a get together with your family, your immediate family, the parents and, your children or whoever's living in the household. Either once a week or twice a week, every other week, or, twice a month or once a month, but have that. We used to call it, back in the day, my parents called it a family meeting. When my kids were growing up, I didn't like that family meeting. I called it, let's have our powwow now, because that's when I gave the floor to my children and I got to hear what they had to say. And I got to hear what they didn't like, how I put things in place, and how, if it was okay for us to look at compromising and doing it this way, and everybody would be happy. So having powwow or having a family meeting sets the tone for you with your children and you as well, because then you guys have that the boundaries are set and everybody knows what they are, I call them reminders. I don't like consequences. What the reminders are, if they don't follow by that, here's what our values are, here's what we expect, here's what your role is, here's what my role is, here's what we expect. And this is why we're a family, kind of thing. And that's, I think, was very helpful for me to start with my kids, because my kids are doing it with my grandchildren. And I did that with all the families, over 100 families I've worked with. They started doing them, and it's been a helper, because I had one family member that I closed. And the grandmother, because she was raising her grandchildren, she called me and told me, Anita, I just want you to know that having those meetings with my grandchildren, we started it once a week. Now it's once every other week, and now we're up to once a month. But having those have been so helpful, because I've been able to see what I've done that I needed to look at from my parents' parenting style, to helping my grandchildren and seeing that they can come to me. I have the child that you helped, that brought you into my home. I have him now. And he came to me to tell me that he was pressured to do marijuana. But he came to me and told me about it that night when he got home. And he didn't lie to me. And he said, Grandma, I have to be honest with you. I did take a couple of puffs. And she goes, okay, so what are you going to do next time? But she goes, I was so glad he came to me, though. That is something he would have never came to me if I would have stayed on the path without having all that help you gave me to help me build the relationship and the listening and the communication and not interrupting and asking questions to them. I would not be here now. And I stopped working with her in 2 years after she called me.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, what a difference it makes for families. That's an awesome gift that you give them, so that the grandparents or the parents and grandparents and everybody else, part of the family, can now function as a family instead of somebody being right and somebody else as a result being wrong, and all this judgmental stuff, when every one of us here on earth is just doing the best we can with what we see, like nobody sets out, oh, I'm going to be a really bad person and try and cause as much problem as I can. It just doesn't, that's not your plan,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it ends up being the plan that you're living. Some of these terrible situations you hear about where, kids get dragged into, these gangs and then ruthlessly they can't even get out and they don't know what to do. And I mean, you just hope and pray that somewhere along the line they have a parent or a grandparent or somebody that they trust enough to go, I've got to move. I've got to leave the city. I got to get out of here because I can't handle this. They're going to kill me, like I don't want to do what they want me to do. I mean, it's terrible. And there's so much of it in all the big cities. I mean, and it doesn't have to be a very big city to be a big problem. And, so what a gift to know that this little guy, young guy, could admit that he, had been pressured, and he decided, well, I don't want to fight the pressure. I'll try it and see what happens. But he at least had a sounding board that he could go home to, tell Grandma what happened, and she didn't judge him or say, oh, that was really wrong, and I told you not to do it, which would have just shut him down and not given him the power to think for himself, so that he could say, well, I don't think it's a good idea. It wasn't that great. I was always really lucky with smoking, because smoking was that kind of thing for when I was growing up. And I tried smoking a couple of times. Fortunately, I absolutely hated the taste. I mean, it was so fun to watch. I was like, oh my God, nobody needs to do that. So I wasn't really gullible for it. But, my friend who tried it at the same time, she got hooked. And I mean, she's still hooked on, many cigarettes a day. And it's just, without that permission to say, this is what happened, this is what I did. And, now if he figures that he needs help to, get away or change or something, at least he's got an ally who, that he can trust, that he's not trying to do it all on his own, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Because when she told me that, I thought about my youngest one, and he came home and told me the same thing. He goes, Mom, I smoked some pot. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he goes, Mom, I don't see what's the big deal about it. I didn't feel anything or whatever. As he's going through my cupboards and grabbing the chips and the salsa out, and I said, you didn't feel a thing, baby? Are you sure? And he's just like, no, mom, I don't know what the big deal is. He goes, I'm never going to do it again. It wasn't that, all that, and I didn't want to break his heart and say, well, honey, you got the munchies. That's part of the side effect. But I didn't have to tell him because he was so proud because he thought he didn't have any reaction. Then a couple of weeks later, I did tell him, and he goes, oh.
Anyway, that's a terrible side reaction because that's not healthy either. So
Yeah. So, but the biggest thing is that in this world today, we all need to see about how we're talking with one another, whether it's your children or a spouse or a friend or a colleague at work. We all need to know, how are we communicating? How are we talking? And when people talk to us, how are we listening? Are we listening, really listening with intent, or are we listening as we're, yeah,
yeah, exactly.
It's and asking questions when you're unsure, or asking for their opinion or their suggestion. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's right. And gosh knows, you might learn something.
Yes, absolutely. And you'll learn a lot more if you do those things, if you ask questions without interrupting, and if you listen with intent, and you watch the way you're talking with that person. Like I said, my grandson had that fight flight, and I didn't realize how I must have said it, or what my body language was when I approached him, because I got that response from him that caused me to say, I need a timeout.
Like something's going wrong here.
Yeah.
This isn't working.
We talk, and this is not cool. This is not, but yeah, it made me become aware of how I need to approach him. He is a teenager now. He's 13. So I have to look at, I can't approach him like a baby. And he said, that's what you did, Grandma. You talked to me like I was a baby, and I'm not a baby anymore. I'm 13. And I was just like, oh, I didn't think about it. I'm just so used to talking to a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. I didn't, and I apologized. That's another thing. It's okay for you to apologize to your children.
Right.
Show them that that you are wrong, and it's okay, because you're human. And
that
accept
gives them
forgiveness.
permission. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm looking at my time and I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't believe 30 minutes went by so fast. I mean, it's just poof. And here we are. But please tell people how they can get hold of you, because you obviously have some very, very valuable information to share with families, and something that could be a complete gift to them.
So I have a free gift on my website. It's www.parentingdna.com. And it's about 3 ways to reconnect with your children. And I also have a Facebook group that they can join, and it is Successful Parenting DNA on Facebook. Those are the ways that they can feel free. And on my website, there is ways that they can make an appointment with me and see all that I have to offer. And I am going to, within the I guess in April, I'm going to have a free 90-minute workshop on how to stop the yelling and build respect.
Sounds great. That sounds great. Well, I hope that people will reach out to you. Parentingdna.com will get you there and get you connected, and Anita can get you into her Facebook group if that's of interest or whatever. And I want to thank you so much for
Thank you so much
being on the show. It's always a pleasure. I learn so much from these shows. People I get to talk to are amazing. So So thank you so
You're
much.
amazing, Mary. Thank you.